Blessed to be a part of your day. Thank you all for joining us and choosing to wake up on the right side. KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller with you here. Joining us now, our friend, cyber security expert, too dangerous for television. He's the director of the National Cybersecurity Society and a board member of the NetShield Corporation. Michael Dougherty, the devil inside the Beltway, the shocking expose of the U.S. government's surveillance and overreach into cybersecurity, medicine, and small business. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. That's the best intro I've heard in a long time. Too dangerous for television. That's pretty good.
Too dangerous for television. Speaking of dangerous, there's a couple stories out. One from WorldNet Daily saying George Soros has been colluding, allegedly, with the social media titans to censor the conservative movement. What say you, sir?
Well, it's totally believable. I mean, these people never admit this directly. It's quacking like a duck. It's a duck. You have a culture that is very broad of, incredibly wealthy people that have a social agenda, that live in an echo chamber, that are feeling all good about themselves, which, people that come in an incredible amount of wealth without getting it going on their own always seem to have this psychological issue. And they decide that they want to solve, save the world and help us, which we don't need their help, thank you. But so they're doing all this to gin the system. It's so ironic that Soros does this. He's the guy that makes all the money off on all these financial games and all these market exploitation, and then he wants to be a savior. It just sounds like they all need to go see a shrink. But instead, they want to inflict themselves on us, and they think they're actually doing the right thing. They're doing this to be nice. Lawlessness, breaking the rules, misrepresentation, honeypots. These social media companies are really nothing more than data brokers, and the jig is up. And we have given them permission unwittingly to basically make us virtual information, pieces for them to monetize and analyze. And they make such a profit margin, they've decided to use some of that profit towards social engineering. And it's a real problem because they were all fine with all this until Trump did it better than Hillary. Now they're in meltdown mode, and they were so upset in 2016. Prepare yourself for the next 8 weeks because the temper tantrums and the screaming are going to get louder and louder until Election Day passes, and who knows what's going to happen if the House stays red after, because they're disintegrating. That's why they're screaming so loudly, and they're so desperate. They're blatantly showing First Amendment violations, and their ideas are so stale they've got to kill discussion rather than debate.
Let me ask you about Facebook. I had a friend of mine who was funded by a conservative group in North Carolina, really did a good job of doing a Facebook show, and they had clips and everything else. It was based on his award-winning radio show, but they went from thousands of views to like 100, and they had no repercussions on this. Now, if you don't do a political show, or maybe if you do the Lib show, they'll let you run wild, but what do you make of that? And they allege that Facebook, slow walk their views.
Well, of course, this is very difficult to prove because it's not a public company. It is it's a publicly traded company, but it's private enterprise. And they signed this massive contract, which they're not exactly negotiable. And you essentially would have to get to discovery, or something else would have to expose exactly what happened. Because the other thing that just came out about Facebook is that a lot of bots have gone and artificially increased views. Now, I'm sorry, that's not Facebook, that's YouTube. But there's inflation of views that goes on that also, and you might see some litigation come out from advertisers that they were paying higher rates based on false markets that didn't really exist. So one way or the other eventually, but unfortunately in this country there are no clocks on the Justice Department or the judicial system, we might see these things come out. But, we're always way ahead. We know they do this stuff. They've admitted they're biased. We know they're biased. I wouldn't be surprised if someone came at him But there's also another issue about that. There's misrepresentations about market size when you do these things, so they can make advertising dollars.
So I'm wondering, Michael Dougherty, just because you're a very entrepreneurial young man, that if maybe we came up with like a lib show that because the people at Facebook wouldn't have an issue with it, we would get more views than a conservative show. There are many people that are doing these sports shows on Facebook, and they don't seem to have an issue with the sports. They seem to have an issue with politics. And back to your point, in addition, Facebook can say, yeah, so what? It's our company. We can do whatever we want.
And this is what is the shell walking with the legal system, because we clicked on the box. So the only way to dissolve a contract is to say there's no meeting of the minds. But, the left tried talk shows and radio, and it didn't work because the left is on theory. They don't have a lot of fact. The more they talk about what really happens, the more they lose credibility. So their survival is based on not talking. And the irony is what the government is versus what they believe are so far apart. And if they don't, liberals have like this triangle of villain and victim and savior. And if they don't get to be the savior and the public, the little downtrodden person, isn't made the victim, they don't have a job. They don't have an ideology. They don't have their entire mindset, and their worldview implodes. So they're going to fight like heck to keep all that in place. And that's what we see. So now they're at the stage where they're fighting to kill speech, so they don't have to admit that this is a failure. This is kind of this isn't the first inning of the movement. They're later in the movement of changing because social media has opened up no real throttling of discussion, and so now they're going to try to throttle it as well. It's pretty amazing when you stand back and watch all this. It puts a huge amount of pressure on the November elections, because what they're trying to do is kill any investigations from continuing. If the House goes blue, they'll be successful, because all the people managing those investigations will be out of their chairmanships. And so it's a battle on many fronts, and it's fundamental stuff. It's pretty intense and scary if we lose.
I would say, or the president is removed.
Oh, yeah, well, that's not going to happen. Then you're going to have such anarchy. Holy cow. I mean, that will be like, that will backfire, and so many Democrats know it. I mean, they're such at extreme levels of fear now. I mean, the fear that they used to get people out and make Obama win the second time was one thing. And that was outrageous and flat out lying and vicious. And that is nothing to what they're doing now. I mean, they really are just doubling. I mean, they're just openly trying to kill free speech, and they're circling and confusing. I mean, this is what happens in politics. You have the story, you try to kill the story, or you try to confuse people with the story. Anything so people don't engage or know what the truth is, so they'll say docile and divided and conquered and not listen. And the story's getting out, so they have to get more extreme, because that's all they got. And then they're so self-righteous, they think because they know they're right, which is the last thing that falls, by the way. They never think they're incorrect. Then they don't, they just double down and go to such extreme of their arguments, because they got nothing to lose. Because, it's okay to break the rules when you know you're right, and that's why some of them are sitting there. Look at Cuomo talk last week about it's okay for physical violence and political talk if you're on the right side against bigots.
Well,
really?
Let me hit you with this, okay? And Michael Dougherty, our great friend, National Cybersecurity Society, man of the world, too dangerous for television, perhaps after this, too dangerous for radio. Incident had happened at the University of North Carolina. The statue of Silent Sam went down, Confederate guy who didn't have any ammunition in his rifle or what have you. It's been there for years, almost 100 years or over 100 years. The students decided that it was racist, it was bigoted, and it had to go. And there had been much controversy involving the statue, and they'd done the same to statues in Durham. However, it's against state law for the university to remove these statues, and yet they took the law into their own hands. Big mob, big riot, decided to do it anyway. To me, that's like what Cuomo says. Look, if it's right, mob rules okay, and let's just break the laws.
That's the left. I mean, that really is what happens. You don't see conservative politics anywhere in the world do mob stuff, because conservative politics are more longer term life experience, factual, and liberal politics are more emotion based and less experience and theoretical. And so you need groupthink, and you need to be protected from debate. So you need an echo chamber. I mean, and it makes perfect sense that young students do this. They have no life experience. They're in a theory incubator that has actually gotten so huge of people that are now later in life that have no real world experience either. So the irony is so obvious, and the lawlessness is so disgusting, and their foolishness is terrible. But they're taking away the boundaries from this type of a physical assault. It's really, really outrageous, and it's terrible. And and whitewashing history, it's really bad. And notice how sanctimonious and arrogant they are. I just look like fools. And that I always say, I'm so glad my college years were not videotaped. Well, I can't wait for these people to see the videotape of their behavior in 30 years. They all hopefully will be mortified and embarrassed, because it's outrageously, it shows so much that, I don't know, people grow out of this. And, let's not forget David Horowitz was a major left-wing guy, and Ronald Reagan was a liberal. So, there's many of them that we just have it at a whole nother pitch now because of social media. It's a double-edged sword, and this is really powerful. It's opened up the stops. It's like cable television. We have 500 channels now instead of 5, and there's a lot of junk, and there's a lot of freedom. But now we're seeing that the powers that be, no matter if they're institutional powers or media powers or political powers, don't like that level of freedom. So they're trying to throttle it back. I mean, who were the first governments that tried to kill the freedom of the internet? It's intimidating to power. China, Russia, North Korea, and look at Apple and Google have to make deals with the devil to do business there. The irony of these tech companies, because they're not just American, they're worldwide, and the sanctimonious political behavior here, and then they turn around and restrict, communication there to make money. And so these college students are supporting the 21st century industrialists. It's kind of like the 20th century pro-union people loving Henry Ford. I mean, it's crazy. These people are just out of it. And hopefully there'll be enough people that will overcome them. And if you are a Republican, you must vote, because these people are kind of frothed up. And there's too much riding. There's no staying home.
Fair enough. Brother Doherty, anything else you'd like to share with us this morning on KIDO Talk Radio?
Oh, how about my selfish plug that you can get my book at Amazon in ebook, audiobook, hardcover, and softcover.
We love the shameless plugs. Thank you, brother.
All right. Good talking to you.
All right. Kevin, thank you. Coming up next, your calls about cybersecurity and eminent domain in downtown Boise for a baseball stadium. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Blessed to be with you. Don't forget, 6:05 tomorrow morning, Dinesh D'Souza, plus your chance to win tickets to the Western Idaho Fair. We go to Holly, who joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio.
Hi,
Good morning. Hey.
How's it going?
Not bad. I never know where you're going, so let's get on with it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Anyhow, I'm really appreciate you talking about these important issues. The issues with the environmentalism and these lawsuits that are filed against the rights of the people and supported in courts is a big concern. I also kind of wanted to talk a little bit, since we're going into the midterms, a way that people can get educated. We've seen so much money come into campaigns from Soros and others, including the Paulette Jordan campaign. People can go to the Idaho Secretary of State and check out the funding. But the thing that I really wanted to focus on was on these PACs. The names of these PACs are not always what they appear to be. For example, the Fraternal Order of Police. That sounds like a really good organization, and that is not the good men and women on the ground. That is, their agenda is to militarize police forces. And at the same time, when we see people trying to disarm the public, or the George Soros-funded Sportsmen for Idaho, so there's just a lot that people need to look into. The names of the PACs are not always what they appear to be. And it's important because we've seen so much. I helped a lot with the District 23 race. We had an openly moderate conservative running against a true conservative. Luckily, the voters saw that, but, where that kind of money, spent $70,000 to try to unseat really good reps. And so we see that because we know when we talked about the book Sovereign Duty with Chris Ann Hall and how we don't need a constitutional convention. The state legislatures have the right by the Constitution to limit the federal government. And so we have to be diligent and make sure that we keep good reps in our state legislatures and make sure we're informed voters and we're not just going off of the radio ads and the things that come in the mail.
Fair enough. Thank you, Holly. That involves work, but that's what it takes. Traffic and weather together. Gabbard. And we go to the publisher of the Gem State Patriot, Tea Party Bob. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. Exciting show this morning. Had an awful lot of things going on, don't you?
And we're still not done yet.
I wanted to say a couple of words on a few things here today. The first on Social Security, which the government has basically stolen $2.8 trillion. Started with Johnson in 69, and then continued with Reagan in 83 when he taxed 50% of it when you make over a certain amount. Then, of course, there's Bill Clinton, who raised the amount to be taxed 85% when he was in office, and that vote was a tiebreaker by Al Gore. We got that one through. Social Security needs to be privatized, and I think Mike Tracy is absolutely 100% right. If we had the money invested in private investments, we could actually get a return of 2 to 7%, and we wouldn't have any tax consequences if they actually did it the right way, the proper way. Another method that we could use and simplify our problems with health care is to put HSA accounts into practice with basically unlimited contributions, where the investment would be kept with no tax consequences in a savings account for people to draw out when necessary to pay medical bills. That's the only time the money would be able to get taken out tax-free. If they were going to take the money out otherwise, then they would pay at a regular tax rate. This plan serves two purposes. It incentivizes people to stay healthy and gives them a big leg up in their retirement. And
right, but sometimes you can't control whether or not you get sick.
I understand that. But the point is that you would have money there to pay for the problem.
Yeah, but that's why I have an issue with health savings accounts where people say, and I remember when Steve Forbes came out with this idea in the mid-'90s, and this was great. Yeah, they encourage you have to use them every year, and you're thinking, well...
No, that's not, no, you didn't listen to me.
No, but wait a minute. Let me finish my point. Do I interrupt you?
Yes, more often than I interrupt you.
Well, then duly pointed. Go ahead.
My point here is that if you don't tax them and you don't restrict them, and they can be passed on to your relatives, the government has no control over them. They did this in Chile. Actually, they've done it in several foreign countries very successfully. But they don't want that to happen here because then they lose control of the money.
Look, I had a friend of mine that recently visited Iceland. You know what he said? He said they're taxed at 50 to 60%. They have no issues with anything. Everything is paid for.
Well, of course. It's the 50 or 60%. We pretty much pay a lot of that here, if you think about it.
We don't get the bang for the buck that the Icelanders do, though.
Absolutely not. The government gets to spend the money. We have to understand the government does not want to fix these problems. Look, they want to have continual access to our money.
You just wait when Paulette Jordan gets in.
Oh, God help us. Is it any different in the way government is taking our money and wasting it on the stupid baseball stadium Not only are they going to take the public money for a private purpose, but on top of that, they're going to take the private property through eminent domain. Why do we, the people, continue to put up with this? Why do we allow this to happen? We have a bunch of thieving politicians, and we need to dump them. I don't understand it.
Well,
as I always say,
but
you get the government you deserve.
We just had an election, and we're not dumping them. We're bringing them all back. We're back, Paul.
Exactly. I can't wait for Dinesh D'Souza to get on tomorrow.
Well, we can't wait.
Maybe he'll have something good to say.
As opposed to both of us. I like what you're saying. Speak for yourself, Miller. Yes.
Hey, Miller, you're doing a great job. Just keep doing what you're doing. We at least have some exciting conversations on here. It's better than the lib programs where you listen to music and get dumber.
Right. Kyle wants to know, is it Kyle or Kylie wants to know who wrote the letter to Kevin in the corner office. I don't know. Some guy named Ryan who did that. So, and if you don't know
a letter to Kevin in a corner office? Oh no.
Oh yeah, wishing me death because we're having Dinesh D'Souza on tomorrow. That must have been part of the program.
I'd be happy to take care of him.
That must have been the part of the program where you were in the bathroom.
Give him my address. Tell him where I live. I'll take care of him.
You and the postcard man. All right. Thank you.
Me and Mac.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day, Kevin.
You too. Our great friend Tea Party Bob. You can catch his writings, his videos, and everything else at gemstatepatriot.com. Coming up next, the battle for Congress heats up and some controversy involving, Dinesh D'Souza's appearance on our program tomorrow. We'll find out about that next. 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Kevin.
And blessed to be with you. Phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So to prove a point, we've been, I've shared this with folks last hour. This was a complaint sent to our big boss here at the broadcast center, corner office Kevin. And look, when you have a great first name like Kevin, everything has to be good, right? So it goes to my point that if you are a person of faith, that if you are a person of conservatism, then you're under fire in the world we live in today. And this is based on just our announcement. And I believe it was the blog. And the blog is very innocuous. And you can check that out at KIDOTalkRadio.com about Dinesh D'Souza coming on. And it's a big get for us. We stumbled onto it, which we usually do around here. And Dinesh D'Souza will join us for the entire hour coming up tomorrow at 6. Plus, we're going to give you tickets to the Western Idaho Fair. But somebody has a problem with it. And if you ever notice when we have people on from, the big places in Washington or wherever, or Pastor Hadian or whoever, and I go, well, tell us a little bit about the personal attacks that the media does not report against you. And they'll tell you. And basically, this was sent to our boss, not my boss by my employment contract, which is Jeff the Suit. It is sent to corner office Kevin, and let me share this with you. Holy F. You are going to have dip, S-word, I can't even pronounce the other thing, on air live. Wow, you got basketballs, but without the basket. Your children will be learning about this. Shame. What is likely to actively be on the wrong side of history? What is it like to be actively on the wrong side of history? Your gonzo journalism has gone sour. If only the Boise market was important, your foolishness might make it on national media. But fascists on the air in Idaho is not news. I will be one of the 3,000 people listening to hate callers that drink the alt-Christ Kool-Aid and shame. In 10 years, I will play it back to your children and shame. Kill yourself. Now for your God, you know it's the right thing. So, I don't know if they were sending that to Kevin Miller, corner office Kevin, Jeff the Suit, whomever. But the libs can dish it out, but they can't take it. The libs don't want people like Dinesh D'Souza on the air here in Idaho. The libs have a problem because they cannot factually articulate a conversation when it comes to facts. If you're ever in a conversation with a lib, and they're losing, which is all the time, they go personal. They go negative. They do whatever they can to attack you personally. Now, this happens all the time. And unfortunately, the media doesn't cover it. The media gives them shield. Democrats don't denounce these actions, but this is what happens. You have to be able to stand up and say, I believe in what I'm talking about. And for 23, almost 24 years, I've been doing that. And coming up this week, 9 years here with you in the Treasure Valley, I've been doing that. Because if you don't, the libs win. And we see what happens when the libs win. We see people disengaged. We see people that are uninformed. We see people that are apathetic about politics and in their ignorance saying socialism is a good thing. Tell that to someone who liberated Italy, France, Germany. Tell that to someone who fought the Japanese. Tell that to someone who made a difference. Tell that someone who was fighting during the Cold War that socialism is a good thing. We'll get to that in a minute. Joining us now live from Capitol Hill, Fox News Radio's Jared Halpern on Fox News Radio's home in the Treasure Valley, KIDO Talk Radio. Jared, it looks like the Senate is focusing in on spending this week.
Well, they're trying, over the next couple of weeks, and this was one of the reasons that, they canceled part of August recess, is to get through the latest batch of spending bills. By the end of this week, the expectation is they will have 9 of the 12 annual appropriations bills. They'll have it done much earlier than we're accustomed to that happening. And they'll pass them with wide support. I mean, these are votes. These are up to this point spending bills that have gotten upwards of like 80 or more votes in the Senate. So a big bipartisan number. That does a couple of things. One, it gets it done early with not having to worry through some of the traps that can happen with timing and all of that. But two, and probably more importantly, the Senate's going to hope that it puts a lot of pressure on the House to follow suit. Obviously, the House does not have to work with the same kind of bipartisanship that they have to work in the Senate. They don't have a supermajority that they have to contend with. So you may see the House try and pass different spending bills that go further on some policy issues or strip money from some programs, add money to others, and then obviously the House and Senate are going to have to work out those differences. But having a big bipartisan vote in the Senate can sometimes help send the message to the House that, listen, this is what we're going to be able to do in this chamber. Obviously, the goal here is to prevent any sort of government shutdown, which Republican leadership absolutely wants to avoid before the midterm elections. Get all of this done in September and not worry at all about, a government shutdown being triggered October 1st when a lot of lawmakers are going to be looking to cut out of here and spend some time back home and on the campaign trail.
Jared Halpern joining us here. So that is good news for a change.
Well, I guess it depends who you're talking about. I mean, it's obviously going to come down to this border wall funding, and I think it's notable that what the one appropriation bill that may not get done in the Senate is the Homeland Security bill. That is the one where any wall funding would be covered. What does that mean? It means that there may have to be some sort of short-term or catch-all measure to try and make up that difference. The president has obviously talked about shutting down the government over the border wall. Now, if you have, 9 or 10 or 11 of the 12 spending bills passed and signed off, you're talking about a pretty small sliver of the government that would be shut down, right? I mean, you wouldn't have a lapse in funding in any of the other departments. So that's part of the strategy here, too, is to try and see if they can get that issue off the table as far as the government shutdown is concerned. But, again, a lot of this is going to depend on how the House responds to it when they get back after Labor Day. And whether or not there's an appetite by either Republican leadership in the House or the White House to really threaten a government shutdown right before the midterm elections.
Well, that's what it's all about. Are people buzzing about the midterms? I'm sure they've been for quite some time, Jared.
Well, I am. I don't know. I don't know about. Listen. I think usually, the campaign, as you know, regardless if it's a midterm or a presidential, picks up a little bit after Labor Day. So that's when I think you're really going to see this pick up. Now, that being said, the president is on the campaign trail tonight. He's got a rally in West Virginia. Alongside, I assume, the Attorney General, Morrissey, who's running against Joe Manchin, the Democrat, one of those vulnerable Democrats up for re-election in a state where President Trump won by a lot and still remains popular. And so, the president is seems like full on here through November. And that's what Republicans want. I mean, listen, the Republicans need the president's base to come out for them. That is always sort of the curse of that first year. I know there's been a lot about, the first midterms of a presidency usually go bad for the president. You'll remember 2010 and these other years that they don't usually go well because the party out of power is usually more motivated, and sometimes you get voters who really, came out for the president and are less inclined to come out when the president's not on the ballot. That is not what Republicans want to happen. They need voters who came out in big numbers for the president 2 years ago to continue to come out and vote in the midterms. And so that's going to be the challenge. I think that's why you're seeing the president in these states this early on. It sets up a calendar that allows him probably to make multiple visits in places where they think that's necessary.
Jared, thank you.
Sure thing.
All right, Jared Halpern, he's fired up. Let's go to Scott in Caldwell. Scott, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning, sir. That was a great exchange you had with that guest. I didn't catch his name, but he was talking about how the left uses emotion rather than fact to push their agendas. And the first thing that popped into my mind is this is just history repeating itself because the Democrats used emotion. They created ugly flyers and stories to generate fear so that they could create the Ku Klux Klan, the Black Codes, and the Jim Crow laws. It was all based on emotion with no basis of fact. And it was actually the conservatives that helped create the Underground Railroad and the Deacons of Justice and fought for the civil rights of the blacks that were trying to be overrun by the emotion from the left.
Well, and of course, no one holds them accountable. Going back to what happened in North Carolina, where you have these people tearing down a statue, and in the comments of Cuomo, not on this but on something else. Well, if it's wrong, then but if you're doing it for the right purposes, it's not wrong.
Well, that's just sponging away history. I mean, when you sponge it away, this is happening in China right now. They're rewriting history in museums to try to make Xi look better.
Right.
But this is where I think that, whoever wrote this vile letter, this is, I think this kind of harkens back to the saying that you're judged by your greatness according to the enemies and the vitriol that you draw. And I think it's fantastic that you got Dinesh on tomorrow. I plan on listening.
Well, thank you, Scott. Take care, and he'll take your questions as well.
I love what you're doing. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You too.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, more on Boise State's move for a baseball stadium. Are you down with that? Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you all for joining us. Phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So, you don't like the Confederacy, you don't like a statue. Does that give you permission to tear something down? We're going to talk about that for a minute. Mob rule in America today.
You never know what's going to happen at the VMAs. I mean, beefs pop off, bad language, people run to the bathroom and send out crazy tweets. It's basically like your typical day at the White House. In your face, Trump.
Right. Now, that young man, Kevin Hart, is an incredibly talented, gifted comedian. People love Kevin Hart. In fact, when he was in town, you had people clamoring for tickets to see comedian Kevin Hart. But really, is there anything funny about that? If you're a lefty, if you're a lib, that was at something called the MTV Video Music Awards, which I suppose during the 80s and 90s rivaled the Oscars and the Emmys. It was supposed to be something of the future, but today it's an afterthought. It's today, it has no relevance, except, again, another awards program where they use their platform to take a shot at the President of the United States. And really, what does that mean? In your face, Trump. Ooh, you really told Trump, right?
You never know what's going to happen at the VMAs. I mean, beefs pop off, bad language, people run to the bathroom and send out crazy tweets. It's basically like your typical day at the White House. In your face, Trump. There
we have it. My goodness gracious. Phone numbers here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. I could go on and on for 20 minutes. I could go on and on into Glenn Beck about my reaction, but I'd love to hear from yours. Coming up, don't forget tomorrow your chance to win tickets to the Western Idaho Fair. Also, your chance to hear Dinesh D'Souza. He will join us exclusively here in the Treasure Valley. And in the Treasure Valley is all that we care about. Ada Canyon and our surrounding counties. He will join us for a town hall meeting, question and answer. We will have him on beginning at 6:05 till 7:05, and then we'll take your calls during that segment, number one. Number two, once again, we'll be getting ready to go to Washington, D.C. in a couple weeks, holding their feet to the fire as we try to make sure that our friends in Congress remain committed to protecting the United States of America, the only show in the Treasure Valley that, again, year after year, I think this is year 6 or 7, that we have been invited to Washington, D.C. We'll have the big newsmakers and everything else. So whether it's your house or the White House, we do our very best to keep you covered right here on KIDO Talk Radio. So at the University of North Carolina, there's this big statue. It's called Silent Sam. So last night, a massive amount of students at the University of North Carolina decided that they'd had enough, that they were going to break the law and tear down Silent Sam. So they gathered, and somebody threw fake blood on it before, and there was someone who was charged with that. And they decided that just like we had tore down the statue of Saddam Hussein, these folks were going to tear this down. So they did. They tore it down. And they broke the law. And unfortunately, since the era of Obama, and basically it was jump to conclusions, never mind presumption of innocence, Duke Lacrosse, never mind anything else, Obama, the police officer in Cambridge, Massachusetts. People of authority are always wrong. That's a dangerous way to look at things. And like I said, most of us will never go to North Carolina. We don't care about the Tar Heels. But on the other hand, this is happening across the country. If you don't like something, do not use the legal process, mob rule, which is really what our Constitution was created by, the Founding Fathers, to protect us from. Mob rule. Hamilton, the great founding father, hated mob rule. That's why we don't have the Articles of Confederation, because of mob rule. That's why we have the Constitution, a stronger federal force, because of mob rule. And it's different. People on social media, we need to rally, we need to do this. I hope these lawbreakers are prosecuted. An example has to be set. Whether individually or economically, it is unpopular to enforce the laws. The law is only as good as the people that are sworn to protect it at the attorney level and at the police level. But it's amazing to me that this is going on across the country. We need to do this. For what? What did Silent Sam ever do to them? Crazy. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning.
Gabbard.
And like I said, it's amazing the sound and sights and fury of mob rule.
When I say people, you say power.
there we have it. Education at its very best. Here's Eben Brown with the details on KIDO Talk Radio.
An angry mob spilling out from a protest gathering at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill is being condemned by the state's governor for pulling down the statue dedicated to university alumni who fought for the Confederacy. The statue, known as Silent Sam, was placed in 1913 with a dedication by a local Klansman. It had been another focal point in the nationwide push to make Confederate monuments disappear.
White supremacy, none of what I stand for. I don't feel really safe with it being here.
The university calls it vandalism. Eben Brown, Fox News.
Exactly. Vandalism indeed. We will continue on protecting America, championing your values. Blessed to be a part of your day. Ray Amaya, great job as always. Everyone else, Glenn Beck is next. God bless and keep the faith. Stay tuned.